shields carved in bronze. And they go out and they march many days. And they come to the mountain. They cross 7 mountain ranges to come to the great cedar forest, where the great cedar trees are. And Gilgamesh goes up on the mountain and says prayers to Shamash, the sun god, who is his special protector. He says, will you protect me and help me in this? And Shamash says, first questions him, why do you want to do it? And Gilgamesh says, well, you have to rid the country of all this evil. Shamash says, well, all right, I don't think it's that great an idea, but he bought the sacrifice. The god bought the sacrifice and said, okay, I'm compassionate, I'll help you, I'll give you these allies, and you'll have 7 fierce winds. The north wind and the icy wind and the frost wind and the hot wind that will be your allies in this fight against this terrific giant Humbaba if you should need them. And Gilgamesh had a dream on the mountain before they came to the forest. And in this dream, he dreamed that he and Enkidu were in the canyon underneath the mountain, and they were like tiny gnats under the mountain. And then he had another dream, a second dream on another night, in which he dreamed that the mountain fell on him and crushed his body, pinned his body under the rock. And then a great light came out of the rock and turned into a light being, a light man figure, who lifted the rock up and freed him. And Gilgamesh told this dream to Enkidu, and Enkidu interpreted it. Throughout the story, Gilgamesh has dreams, and Enkidu is better at interpreting them and saying what they mean. The instinctual man, the wild man, is more intuitive, more connected with nature, more connected with the unconscious, altered states of consciousness. And he says, this is a very favorable dream. This means we will succeed in our fight against this giant because you have this light God helping you. And then Gilgamesh had a third dream, which was a disaster where dust clouds blackened the sky, volcanic eruptions, dust settled over everything. For many days and nights, nothing but darkness. They came to the forest. The forest was an enchanted forest. It had a magical, enchanted gate around it, outside of it. And when they came to the gate, Enkidu touched it and said to Gilgamesh, don't touch this gate. What just happened to me is that my whole arm and hand went paralyzed and weak when I touched the gate. So you have to smash the gates, he said to Enkidu. I'll leave it to you to think about what this means. This whole myth of going in and slaying the forest giant is the myth of our ecological catastrophe that we're presently in. We are the people, in the form of the lumber companies, supported by government and industry, who go in and cut down the giant cedar forests and the giant rainforests in the Amazon and the cedar forests in the Northwest to build our cities. And in doing so, we violate the guardian spirits of nature that are assigned to protect those and maintain those groves, as sacred forests, sacred to the gods. So I think it's interesting to say that right here in this oldest myth of our culture, dating back to maybe 3,000 years BC, we have this ecological dilemma already indicated very clearly. Because then they go into the forest and the giant recedes into the inner recesses of the forest and they don't see him, and Gilgamesh proceeds to start cutting down the great cedar trees. This summer I was up on Vancouver Island, on the west coast of Vancouver Island, where they have these cedar forests, and where the connection between what's happening now and this myth became clear to me. These cedar trees sometimes are over 1,000 years old. They are 50 or 60 feet in diameter. They are the most magnificent trees that you can imagine. And they're being cut down. So he proceeded to cut down these cedar trees. And when he had cut down very many of them, he fell into a coma, a sleep coma, from which he could not rouse himself for several days. Like Enkidu, who his wrist and hand got paralyzed, Gilgamesh cut down the cedar trees. He became paralyzed, fell into a coma. Humbaba, the giant, in the meantime, the giant forest guardian, heard the cedar trees being cut down and came out of the inner recesses of the forest to where Gilgamesh and Enkidu were, having cut down the trees. Enkidu managed to rouse Gilgamesh just in time from his sleep, and it is said that Humbaba fixed them with his fierce eye, his eye of death. He fixated them with his eye of death. As in another Sumerian myth, Eresh-Kigal, the goddess of death, fixates Inanna, the goddess of heaven, with the eye of death. And Gilgamesh calls upon the allies given to him by the sun god, the north wind and the frost wind and the icy wind and the hot wind and the fierce wind and the hurricane wind. And they come and they blow and they confuse and immobilize the giant, so he cannot fight effectively. And so Enkidu and Gilgamesh are able to pounce upon the giant and cut off his head. And drag him, the body, and the cedar logs back to the city. Before they kill him, one other last telling episode. The giant, he's been caught by them, by the combination of the winds and Enkidu and Gilgamesh's strength. He's trapped. He's caught. He appeals to them. He says, "Don't kill me. I am doing my job here as guardian of the forest. You have seen the abode of the gods, which is in the inner recesses behind these forests, the beautiful Edenic garden, the garden of Ishtar, the garden of the sun god, are all protected by this forest. You have seen it. You should let me go. I am the guardian. I'm doing my job. I was sent here to protect this forest. Don't let me go." And Gilgamesh says, "Well, I'm inclined to agree with you. I think we should let you go. This catching animals and wild creatures is not such a good idea. I think we should let you go," Gilgamesh says. And Enkidu says, interestingly enough, "I don't think that's a good idea, because if you let him go, he'll kill you." So Enkidu is suspicious. He doesn't trust the other forest dweller, the other forest wild creature, because he knows basically what he wants is to escape, and he'll do his best to continue his role. So he says, if you want to really get rid of this giant, you better kill him now while you got him, because if you don't, he'll get you. So Gilgamesh says, "Well, you're right." So they kill him. So it's a very interesting story in that, it's the arrogant human still who wants to go out, who creates an enemy out of nature, in order to exploit nature, calls nature evil. That's what the Christians did later on. And violates the sacred integrity of nature for his own exploitative ends. The wild, instinctual part of him tries to warn him, but then when he does agree to go along, because he has no choice, because he is one with him, he is the same person, he then has a better understanding of what the real issue is and what really needs to be done to accomplish the objective. Where Gilgamesh still is more likely to be compassionate. So it's not a black and white story. It's not like Gilgamesh is all bad and Enkidu is all good, It's not the noble savage either. It's the canny wild man. It's a very different thing. And they both together, after all, because they are together, they're both in the same fate. They both suffer the same fate and the same consequences. So then they go back to the city. That's the end of the second main story of that. And I'll just tell you the third one. I'll leave out the last one. Well, because I don't want to take too much time. The last one has to do, the third of these stories in this epic has to do with the story with the goddess Ishtar.